Good evening. Yeah. Hobart time, 6:02 and 19 seconds. Where is everyone? Oh, my. G'day, Paul. Everybody's celebrating, are they? Is that what it is? Bloody hell. I just finished my celebrations with the old man. So we had a lamb fiesta. So some nice lamb chops and some Greek cheese and yes, pretty much that. And some ciders. I'm drinking my coffee at the moment, but I do pop the. I've I've got a pagan cider from your neck of the woods down south. I think they do produce it down that way. So I do have one of those, a pagan cider. I know, I know. Oh God, an Orthodox Christian drinking a pagan cider of all things. Oh, what a heretic! Uh, yes, yes. That's it. That's it. Exactly, Matt's celebrations. So I've got my drink, I've got my coffee, just to basically keep me going for the night. And then I'll have my drink to sort of soothe me, So that'll be the last one for tonight. I've had a few. So let's keep it sensible. So I don't start saying funny things and people go, Harry's drunk. It's very easy to get tipsy now that you're carnivore. Yeah, it's not like it used to be. Let's put it that way. Far easier to get tipsy. Fat adapted, they say. God, it's a struggle with alcohol and fat adaptation. As you understand, Paul, as you understand. Ah, BC, Cancer and Life Journey. G'day, mate. How are you? Ah, yes, it's definitely. Oops, oh shit. Oh, anyway, it's gone flying. It's definitely party time soon. Uh, what's he going? Just finished video with Richard. Ah, okay, so you two will basically uh, enjoying yourselves. Anika, how are you? Uh, I can't believe you can't get those things that we talked about into Bulgaria. Disappointing. Disappointing that you can't get them. Yes. Oh, it is what it is. G'day, Karen. Good evening from Washington State. Yes. Well, God, it must be very, very late where you are, my dear. Very, very late. Yes, yes. Here it's 6:05 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time daylight savings. I have to say that because we've got the bloody up in Queensland. They're on they 5 o'clock. They don't practice them. Uh, Western Australia, I believe the Northern Territory as well, do not practice daylight savings, which is probably a good thing because there is some associated evidence that the circadian sort of mismatches aren't very healthy. Oh, okay. In the evening. So you've still got about an hour and a half before you have to get to bed. You could push the envelope. I went to bed last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, yes, it was a struggle getting up in the morning. And then I just barely, nearly just got onto Bart K's right at the end of the tail end, and then went in, had a quick shower. Then straight after that, the live stream, and then after that, off to Dad's, back again, and yeah. So, bit of a hectic day, to say the least. I thought I was celebrating. Apparently, I wasn't. No, yes. What do they say? No rest for the wicked. What is Australia Day? It's our national day. It's like the US has what is it? You've got your July 7th, I believe, Independence Day. Greece has got 2 national days. The real big one is March in March on the 21st, which is for the liberation of the country. And then there's a secondary one, which is for the 28th. The initial defeat of the Axis forces at the beginning of the Second World War. So, yeah. Oh, the 4th. Oh, yeah, that's what am I saying? Yeah, the 4th of July. I'm getting confused. Yes, the 4th of July. Yes, true. Thank you for correcting me. What's the 7th? There is a 7th for something else. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, yeah, so this is our national day of when, because Australia was a number of colonies prior to that, and at the beginning of the 20th century, they federated into a federated state. And then they decided, well, how do we celebrate this day? So they picked a day which coincides with the day when you could say there was an initial settlement in Sydney Cove. And so that's why the left now calls it Invasion Day. Yeah, it's a bit like that. I mean, they need to get over those historical things. You can't reverse history, and modern people are not responsible for the past. And everybody's been a conqueror or a victim at some stage. Everybody's been a slave or a slave master at some stage. We're all humans, and none of us are innocent of the past sins of our fathers and grandfathers and whatever else. So it's ridiculous. And so there's both good things in the past and bad things as they are today, and all those things made us who we are today. So, we should celebrate our history and be just understanding that people had different values in different times of history for different reasons, and they had different levels of understanding of the world and themselves and other things. So, it's easy to point the accusing finger at somebody who's ignorant about certain things. I would say the person who's pointing the finger is the one that is ignorant, because they sort of think that they are superior to their ancestors, who without them, they wouldn't exist. So it's childish, and it's become this self-hatred in a sense. That's why I'm really, I don't really care what day. If they change the day, I wouldn't really care, as long as we're celebrating an Australia Day. But it's just the reason why I oppose at the moment. I've gone to the camp where initially I didn't really care. Now I go, nah, F yous, and just because of their arrogant and their hatred, they'll burn the Australian flag. These middle class left wing wankers, they do all sorts of things. I mean, you probably have similar wankers in America as well that do similar things, and it's really that obnoxious hatred of themselves. Really, I mean. The Westerners have achieved the highest level of supposedly civilization. It's questionable at this stage, but then everybody wants to enjoy our living standards, our world, our rights, our freedoms, and all that. And these people make out that we're the worst. I mean, well, if we're the worst, why are all these people coming our way? And I say to the left, if we're the worst, why don't you go to those places? Go away, F off, go to those places if you're not happy here. It's just annoying, to say the least. But that's what brainwashing does through a woke education, doesn't it? Kiddies. Yes, it does. I'm okay again after only 2 days of eating cheese. As I said, calcium genetics. I think I pointed that out to you. See? Yes. So you probably, by not having for a while calcium-rich foods, you made yourself deficient. Yes. It sucks to be one of the 24%, like myself, who've got genetics that require more calcium than the general public. It just is what it is. But we get to enjoy some nice dairy like cheese. So, Seaman 124, 122, sorry. You should have a 4, you know. It sort of rhymes better, 124. 122 sort of, I have to, it's sort of the arithmetic. No? Okay. And thank you for the Happy Australia Day message. Yep. Yes, thank you for correcting me. It's all BS by ignorant commies. True. Neo-Marxists, as they called him, or Fabian socialist now. Because really it's sort of this traditional Fabian socialism that's sort of morphed into this bizarre neo-Marxist, transhumanist, it's a really bizarre, it's really hard to describe because, if you can think anything which is anti-civilization, anything that really just hates itself, put it all in one package, it's really how to describe it. I don't think the word woke describes it fully, how evil and really sick it is. Yeah. Scotty, good evening, folks. Beautiful day here today. Just got out of the pool. Ah, you're really enjoying yourself. Way too much. Far too much. And a question from Seedman122. That's how I'm going to call you. Seedman122. Okay, quick question. There's never a quick question. Why do people ask Harry a quick question? There is no quick questions with Harry. You should know that by now. How long have you been a subscriber, Seedman? Uh, am I right, Scotty? God, I had a blood test recently. Oh, fantastic. After being carnival 5 years, my creatine was only just slightly above normal, and GFR was just within the limit aged 64. Any thoughts? Thanks. Nothing. I wouldn't waste my time at all. If you're eating more animal foods, your creatine's going to be naturally slightly higher, depending on a lot of things, exercise, many things can vary. Remember the normal creatine levels or the average range, that's determined by the average of the population. And what does that mean? Well, most of them are under eating protein. So what do you think the levels are? Oh, no wonder you're in the top of the normal. Even if you're slightly over, I'd say there's no problem. It's a bit like, looking at metabolism, fat metabolism, and fat-based metabolism and glucose and carbs metabolism are two very different animals. One requires more T3 because it actually requires it at specific enzymes that are involved. Beta oxidation doesn't. The requirements for some of these thyroid hormones are much less in in fat metabolism in general. When it comes to the amount of carbons per molecule, 2 with fat, 6 with glucose. So what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have more CO2. That's just logical. You're going to combine it with more oxygen and have more CO2. If you're a Ray Petey, you'll say, oh, that's fantastic. Really? Tell that to Greta. She won't think that's fantastic, that you're actually breathing out more CO2. How dare you bigots? You veg-tarded bigots. So, we need to be logical about these things. There's a whole lot of enzymes that need cofactors, so there is going to be variability in what people produces metabolites within the out of the metabolic processes. So when you look at research, obviously, I mean, Jay Ducky showed me a piece of research and I explained it to him, and he actually said, "Oh, look at this piece of research. Look at how high the amount of in these low-fat people, how high the metabolic rate is." I go, "Yeah, but that's because what are they using as proxies? They're not measuring metabolism accurately. They're using proxies, and the proxies are oxygen consumption, and the other part is, what's the other part? CO2. But remember, if you've got more CO2, more carbon, what's going to happen? A lot of that oxygen is going to come in. More of that oxygen is going to be used to bind it with the carbon to create CO2, more CO2. So so your VO2 will change as a consequence. This is why fat oxidation actually requires more oxygen, and because it has per molecule 2 carbons rather than 6, the consequence of that is that you don't need that oxygen gets used for the actual what we call fat oxidation, and it's not used in terms you don't require as much for CO2 to get that stuff out of the body, because you're not going to use it as structural material, the carbon, then you need to breathe it out. Okay, that's what the lungs are for. So obviously the one metabolism is going to be very different, and so measuring metabolism or metabolic rate for a fat burner compared to a glucose, a sugar burner, is completely different. Yeah, so we are using the wrong metrics, is what I'm trying to say. Stop using the wrong metrics. So if we move away from that mindset, and even doctors are completely ignorant about low carb diets, carnivore, and all that, but the metabolites and the composition and the numbers are slightly different, and they are, it's no different with LDL. Why does LDL-C go up? Well, obviously, what are you oxidizing mostly? Well, you're oxidizing mostly. What do your triglycerides go down on a low-carb diet? Because you're trafficking not sugar, but fats to the peripheral tissue. That's what your mitochondria are primarily using. So those VLDLs, triglycerides, are shrinking very quickly because the uptake of that energy is being used very fast, because that's the only energy mostly in the system. You've only got a basal level of sugar that's primarily used for red blood cells, the brain, your balls need it for semen production and stuff like that, and they need a bit of some of that glucose gets converted to fructose to be used, that sort of stuff. So you do need a bit of sugar, but gluconeogenesis covers that. But generally speaking, the body is smart and knows exactly what it's doing. It goes, this is what you're giving me, this is what I need to, these are the transcriptions, these are the enzymes that I need to do this and deal with these sort of things. It's logical. It's people that have this training, or what I call ideology, that immediately, and viewing things in a reductionist way, immediately get really upset when they see certain markers. So I think Bart Kay actually said it in one of his live interviews really correctly. He said, "Why are you bothering? Do you see a Maasai or a Hadza who was on a super hyper carnivore type diet, on a super you could more now in our interglacial period, we're on super carnivore type levels. Do you see them basically doing all these tests and all that? No, unless you've got an underlying You've just come out of the previous diet. You've got an underlying. I wouldn't waste my time, you know. So just as a general reference, you've got to be careful with these numbers because they are skewed to the values for people who are on sad diets. You know, we have no research on where the level should be, but we do know from some old research that goes all the way back to the 1920s and 30s when they went out to tribal people and did some tests. Yeah, some of these markers were slightly higher than Westerners, but there was no there was no inflammation, even though some of these numbers were slightly higher than the Western populations. And it's understandable. They're eating more animal products. So wouldn't you have metabolites coming out in the urine as a consequence? It doesn't mean any problems because the only way you can actually find out whether your kidney function is down is actually physically testing it and seeing, scanning it. And I can tell you, I upped my father's, he's 90 just recently, 6 days ago. I upped his, in the last more than a decade, upped his protein intake. He had shrinkage, he had atrophy of the kidneys, um, high blood pressure, and I was able to basically reverse all that. And the way I did it was more protein, more taurine, more leucine to basically increase. So more eggs. And that's how we reversed all that sort of stuff. You think I cared about these numbers? These numbers were going up on Dad's account. But guess what happened? A decade later, his kidneys are much larger, healthier, and the cancer is shrank by half. I just would hope he would give up some of his sugar. It's come down to very little now, but still, he would be better off for it. But still, he's probably going to die with the damn cancer rather than die from it at this stage because it's really growing in reverse in a sense. So hopefully, by the time he's 100, he'll hardly have any. But because he's eating more and more meat as it goes along, he's becoming more carnivorous. From what I've noticed, his levels are much higher and higher. Doesn't he actually even he's neglected a bit his own veggie garden. He just grows a few things now, a few tomatoes, a few uh, Lebanese cucumbers, those sort of things. We have them. They call them Lebanese for some reason because the Lebanese popularised them, but they do exist in Greece as well. They're the same stuff within that whole region. And yeah, that sort of stuff, pumpkins and stuff like that. That's what he has. He gets his pumpkin bread, which is pure pumpkin bread. I have checked, no seed oils, no nothing. It's an artesian type, a sort of a traditional one. But then again, there's that pumpkin does have sugar, but he just cuts one slice and toasts it and puts butter on it and a big slab of cheese, something that his mother used to do when he was young. So he likes that. So I'm not going to deny him since he's going to die with the damn thing. I'm not. I give him senolytics now and then, like Pfizer and other things, just to help him along in that regard. But I'm not going to get too wound up. He's 90s that he, I don't want to make his life a misery towards the end, so to speak. So, and it's a different thing. I'm convinced what I'm doing. Other people, it's trying to force them or scare them and all that. Yeah, I don't see the value in it, to be honestly. So I personally wouldn't worry, Seed Man. I just wouldn't worry. Um, what is the RDI for kids for retinol per kilogram? Uh, my brother wants to feed his 6-month-old baby with butter and homemade liver pate. Just check the NIH. I just can't. Give me a sec. Well, that by 0.3. You're looking at around approximately anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 IUs, or 300 to 500 micrograms. So that's what you're really looking about in that regard. So that's the sort of mark you'll be fairly safe. Come on. So that's the link. They usually say about 3,000 IUs for. I don't really worry if it's a bit higher than that, like 2,000. Honestly, for people, so let's say for regular people, um, you're probably looking at anywhere between somebody who's slightly shorter, 3,000 IUs, somebody who's sort of your sort of mid-range height, about 4,000 to 5,000 IUs, somebody above that between 5,000 to 7,000 IUs. Never go over 10. And even that old geezer, remember, he was about slightly over 7 or close to 7,000 IUs. 6,000 and something, probably from other foods, probably got up to 7,000 IUs over decades and decades and decades and had no problems. So, the biggest problem is a lot of these arse hats that basically get into trouble is they go over 10,000 for a very long time. You're supposed to stay below 10 or less in terms of vitamin D and vitamin A, retinol, particular, the best source. But I usually aim for around about 5,000 IUs for myself. For younger people, anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 IUs is pretty much fine. So if they're really young, 1,000. If they're, 4 and older, probably up uh, to 2,000. And then, in their teenage years, when they're over 14, you're looking at about 3,000. And then as they get into adult, depending on their height, their size, how big they are, that range between 3 to 7. Um, the body will store. So you don't have to be. I usually say if you aim as an adult for a child, about 1,500 IUs, for an adult around 5, you probably are well covered. And it's really easy on a carnivore diet. If you eat a bit of dairy, you eat some eggs every day and stuff like that, it's very easy to get to those levels. But even if you don't get really wound up. Even if you get to 3,000, that's fine. So don't get too wound up. The body has the ability to conserve. If it has a bit too much, we don't want excess, but if it has a bit too much, you know what it does? It excretes it through the bile. So your bile pushes it out. The reason why I tend to say conservatively, like 3,000 or 4,000 or stuff like that, even if you're at that rate, is because I don't know how well somebody's gallbladder is working to excrete the stuff, the excess. That's, so I have to be a bit conservative for that reason. Now, a young child is unlikely to have a gallbladder disease or problems with their gallbladder. Very unlikely, so you're much safer. Anyway, that's if you ask Harry about 1+1, you get 1 hour elaboration of any mathematics. Can't answer this. LOL. Exactly, Matt. Exactly. Yes. A deep analysis. and some of you enjoy it. God, should try waterboarding on you guys. Priscilla, how are you? You probably would say more. Give me more. uh, what did people? Hold on. Let me just. What did people do? Did of mostly in prehistory. So we're talking about Paleolithic periods, hunt, uh, did some artistic things, and a lot of, let's say, enjoyment times. They had a lot of free time on their hands. It's probably why they kept the birth rate up pretty well for that reason. Yes, yeah, it's not a problem with. I primarily consume pork and also lamb, and I feel much better doing that rather than beef. And as I've said, there is some there in the last 10,000 years. There is definitely some. I mean, you saw like Anika earlier. I mean, she, for her own health reasons, sort of cut back on dairy and all that, and she ended up inducing a mild deficiency in calcium due to those genetics that I've talked about. There's a video that I made some time ago which has to do what causes on a carnivore diet an increase in blood sugar. It's due to a calcium deficiency, and that happens in 24% of the population who have these pastoral genes. And because they have the pastoral genes, they tend to be more susceptible. They can't absorb calcium as well as tribal people can, like the Hadza. They don't need to eat dairy. They can absorb calcium from other animal foods really easy. But populations that tend to consume a lot of calcium, like dairy-based pastoral people, they tend to have all these changes in their calcium, in the genes that are involved in calcium homeostasis. And it's because we need some calcium, but we don't need excessive amounts. And so the body needs to either inhibit its absorption, the excess, or or basically push it out, or basically excrete it if it can. And there's a rate limiting in all these sort of things. So you've got to understand the sort of these variability. And people say, well, aren't I going to be deficient for my bones and all that? No, because if you're getting a small amount every single year over multiple years, that small amount is what builds up the mineralization of your bones. That's what happens when we're young. What is bone? Mineralized collagen. They're very flexible, the bones initially, and they just mineralize slowly every day. A few extra, all these extra grams and all that can build up to a lot of thousands and thousands of grams. So it doesn't take, when you actually look at how much is in the bone, calcium, in your whole skeletal, in just a couple of years, you can actually build up to levels where you got too much. Then you start excreting any excess. So, this whole notion that calcium is important, no. The reason why bones break down and people become osteoporotic and all that has nothing to do with calcium. They tried the calcium things, supplements. It didn't work. All they did was create soft tissue calcification and a lot of stiffness around people's bodies. That's just stupid. We do not need the RDI levels. The problem is people are on carbohydrate diets with a lot of with a lot of anti-nutrients that are binding, and oxalates and everything that are binding calcium, and so they have to basically recommend higher amounts so people can get enough. And due also to the genetics that people have on these poor diets, they end up basically becoming more calcium deficient. But the reality is the level of calcium actual that we need isn't that high. As long as we're getting good levels of, because bone is mineralized collagen, so as long as you're getting enough protein, you can maintain the scaffolding, um, of the actual bone, and then the mineralization happens over time in its natural way, in its natural course. So this whole notion, you need these massive amounts. I need to process a damn calcium video, which I haven't. Bad boy. So yeah, it'll come out soon. Yeah, and explain in much more detail than I'm doing now. So I would say, look, if you feel good on it, fine. You know, as long as you feel good on it and it's covering your needs in that regard. So if it's not, then that's a different thing altogether. Or up in, or up in Bundaberry, up until a couple of days ago. Got back the next day. There was a croc on the beach nearby where we were staying. Always interesting. Oh, or a pet. You know, crocs are pets in Australia. You know, we use them to eat, we feed Americans to them. Just kidding, Karen. Just kidding. But then again, I don't know about Scotty. He may feed people to them. Pet croc. Yes, it's one thing when you're in because anything north from Sydney goes from subtropical to tropical, and there's plenty of crocs on the coastline all the way up and all the way through northern Australia. Actually, they've even been found crocs swimming across the waterways from island to island in the Torres Straits and across um, where northern Australia, Darwin, and all that are close to some of the islands that go all the way up to Indonesia. Crocs literally swim through there constantly. You go boating through there, you see a croc going past. So yeah, plenty of them up there. They culled them a couple of years ago, but now it's protected. uh, my husband, 55, is in hospital. Burst appendix. Oh well, that's unfortunate. Removal. Um, Compromised kidneys, infection continues to flare up. 5 days post surgery. Taurine will help. Yes, it will. Can't wait. Uh, yeah, to get him home. Yeah, yeah, definitely taurine will help in that regard. So yeah, it's unfortunate when that happens. I've known a person in Greece that basically had a burst appendix and ended up dying. The poor old man. So it can happen in later ages as well. It usually doesn't. It's rare. It's very rare. Um, but sometimes you may have like low grade pain in that area, um, and it just goes on and carries on for many years. And it's never at the point where it becomes a really severe problem, and then all of a sudden it really gets nasty very quickly for whatever reason. There could be due to even viral infections, could change the microbiome sort of situation and make things a bit more problematic. It's very hard to know exactly because nobody's done any real research. It's all speculation. Um, but taurine will help both with the kidneys to reduce oxidative stress, and also it should regulate better the gut microbiome, lower some of the histamine levels, so discomfort can also be reduced, but also upregulate some of the pathways and support some of those pathways inside the gut. The other thing that I would actually consider also is lactoferrin supplementation, because lactoferrin, interferon, you can actually upregulate some of the antioxidant and antiviral sort of pathways inside the actual gut and around where, where some of this infection may still be present. so we can try to bring it down. So you've got the regulations. Has he got a good vitamin D levels? Because his vitamin D levels are very important. I'd basically consider injectable vitamin D to get his levels up quickly, because that's going to help his immune system, together with the taurine, the lactoferrin. The three synergistically will help in the process of improving the whole situation. So if you can get him the active form, there is pills. Where is it? The active form. Go away. This is annoying. That's it. You're not supposed to supplement with this, because this is the active form, okay? This is the one that actually gets into your system, and we don't want people calcifying themselves. We're supposed to get either from the sun or from your normal vitamin D, which slowly gets, that converted, and the body determines how much it converts and how much it stores. Got it? And that's the reason why we don't take this, because this can calcify yourself by bringing in excess calcium. So we only use it as a short term if people don't like injections. Some people don't. And so this one is pretty good in that regard. And this is available on the North American Amazon site. So dismissed. So just remember, you're not supposed to. It's a weak thing. You don't go crazy on it for that reason. So if you really want to boost your vitamin D levels quickly, you use it, but you don't constantly use it, is what I'm saying. We don't want to drag in too much calcium, but also can be used. Let's say somebody's got a calcium deficiency, they can use this quickly to fix that within a week or two, and then they go off it. So it's it can be used as a biohack, or to boost the immune system quickly if you're down with, let's say, C19, or the flu, and you need to clear it out of your system fast. Take this, and you don't have to wait for a couple of weeks for the conversion. It happens within a couple of hours, which is what we want to boost our active form of vitamin D in a couple of hours. So anyway, where were we? Would people from ancient or prehistoric times have suffered from wood smoke in their dwellings? If so, why were chimneys adopted so late, since we could have definitely made much, definitely been made much earlier? Look, when you look at like the Hadza and populations like that, they don't actually cook in huts, so they're not in dwellings. They're not cooking in dwellings at all. And some of them have ventilation. The biggest problem is where we find most of this is amongst agriculturalists, like in Africa, a lot of the agriculturalists, where the Hadza, they cook outside. They'll light up a fire, and then they'll use like parts of like um, they'll cut, where they're most the branches have like a fork type thing, a wide fork. They'll find branches that have got a wide fork, and they will mount they'll actually put the fork like that, and they'll whack another piece of from the branches in that sort of position so it holds it, and then they'll mount the meat on it, and they'll have it close around the fire, and it will cook like that around that fire. So that's how they do it. So it's a very, very different style. It's not indoors and stuff like that. So, there weren't pots and pans or any of that sort of stuff. Pots and pans and all that come along with the advent of what we call early civilization, which then introduces these things and introduces indoor cooking. Okay, prior to that, it happened all outdoors, so you didn't need a chimney; it was not a problem. So it was in Neolithic, not in Paleolithic, in Neolithic times and onwards that we basically started seeing more of this indoor cooking. And obviously that had consequences and still does in Africa today. Yeah, in a number of areas. The other thing is a lot of areas use dung. So shit, basically dried shit, dung. So they use dung, and the problem with dung compared to, like, if you're using like dried out wood or whatever, what happens is it goes into a charcoal. You get less smoke. Dung has more smoke. Why? Because it has moisture. It's the moisture that creates a lot of the smoke and particulates in that, which then are breathed in. So there's your problem. It's, in mostly arid sort of environments, which tend to be semi-agriculturalist. So it's very different. Hope that is clear. No, crocs taste like fish. That's true. They do have a whitish. I thought they taste like chicken. So not a fan. Generally, crocs rarely even go south of Townsville. True. Meanwhile, Rockhampton, Bundaberry is a few hundred kilometres south of Rockhampton. Yep. So yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Primarily, they keep up in the tropical areas, obviously, well away from the rest of us. Thankfully, particular, you won't get them down in Tassie. It's too cold for them down here. So they'd be probably less active here. You could probably have a croc as a pet down here in Tasmania because it'd be less feisty. You know what I mean? And being less feisty is probably going to be less problematic, less snappy. Yes, and we've got plenty of birds down here. We can feed them, so it wouldn't be a big problem for us in this neck of the woods. Yes. And just for these are all jokes. Just for my feed them possums, definitely. Uh, especially the ones that break into your home. Yes, definitely. I agree. Definitely feed them possums. Just for the North American crowd and then some of the European crowd. Um, no, we do not have crocs like some Americans have alligators. As well, there probably are some people, but crocs are not as, let's say, are much more dangerous in compared to alligators. Yeah, they forget about trying to even domesticating. You may get, let's say, this amount from some other reptiles. From crocs, zero. You know, as I said, they're very snappy. Um, if you've got a death wish, yes, get a croc as a pet. But I definitely wouldn't um, for any other reason. That's the vitamin C, the active form. For anyone that may be interested, it can be useful. People who don't know, possums are a little prolific in Tassie and New Zealand. Introduced here, introduced there. Possums have been exported as food in the past from Tassie. Yes, we have a lot of possums down here. They get in if you're close to like a wilderness area, or even in a suburb that's a bit further out, you'll get them coming into your roof. I mean, I'm in a suburb area, and I still get wildlife here. I've got these other like marsupials that hop around my outside my place and down the road and all that. And I'm talking in a city, okay? So Tasmania is a bit weird like that. You walk up there. It's probably because they've probably come up from that reserve that's not too far away. They've probably hopped out of there, and that's only about what is it? A walk up the hill takes about 15 minutes, and then you're in a reserve. And I suspect they've probably come from there. I just haven't bothered calling Parks and Wildlife to come and pick them up, so to speak. They're just cute, popping around, hopping around, just eating the vegetation in the gardens. Uh, but no, currently no possums in this area. We did have a possum. One of the neighbours had a possum infection, got it removed. Uh, yes, my brother from another mother also had one, and let's say something very nasty happened to it. Q, Q, Q. What are your thoughts? Um, the mineral boron. I've talked about it plenty of times. Eating carnivore doesn't give you much, if any, at all. We don't need much on. You need more on a carbohydrate metabolism than on a low carb metabolism. So we get enough. The only time I actually recommend it as a supplement is when I'm trying to, if people have got like deranged, they've come off a sad diet, or they're in this sort of menopausal state, women, and they're really sort of things are a bit deranged. And I usually get them, you don't want to do it for too long, because when you consume too much boron, even in food, it can actually create an underlying deficiency in magnesium and potassium. That's why you need trace amounts. You don't need like milligrams and all that. That's why we do it for a short term. So, and when people say, oh, you need like milligrams and milligrams, yep, that's the video on boron of, for shitloads of time. No, you don't. You'll actually induce magnesium and potassium deficiencies long term if you do that. And there's a lot of idiots that do that, and a lot of idiots that eat very high boron foods and end up causing these other deficiencies and derangements in the electrolytes. No, we don't do that. But short term, it can be useful, like taking 12 milligrams for just 1 week, then dropping to 9, then to 6, then to 3, and doing it for 3 months to sort of normalize some of the estrogen sort of derangements that some people have, and sort of try to regulate and normalize some of the those hormones. And if you're doing it out to 3 months, if you're not eating enough meat, you're doing more fat and less protein, it's probably advisable to use an electrolyte. If you're getting enough meat, you probably are okay on that front, because you're getting more than enough magnesium and potassium to offset any effects from the boron. So, but that's the only purpose that I actually recommend it for in that regard. For all the other biological functions, the trace amounts that comes from animal foods are more than enough for those functions. Because you've got to map out all the enzymes that are going to be used in fat oxidation compared to glucose oxidation. So, two are very different. The requirements for hormones, the requirements for all sorts of things are very different. As I said earlier about the T3, and I've done a video covering that as well. So go away and check that out. Bit of a stretch calling Hobart a city, but okay. What? How dare you? I'll do my Greta impersonation. How dare you, Scotty? Uh, can you believe that, Finbear? Thank you for the Happy Australia Day. If people go to visit Tassie, be wary of driving at dawn or dusk. True. The roos and wallabies are an absolute threat to your car. True. Very true. And the friggin' idiots they sit there looking at you. What do we Tasmanians do? If we've got a good bumper bar in front, he learned something permanently. Uh, Roadkill. I mean, food. If you're really desperate, better be careful what I say. I'll get in trouble. Anyway, Stefan, how are you, mate? I left Panama and I'm in Egypt. Good for you. So you're globetrotting because you've been down. Oh, I know why you left Panama. You're trying to avoid the US invasion. Is that the reason? Uh, I had to say that I couldn't help myself. Can't say much yet. Meat, butter are not cheap. True, true. Main staples here are bread and vegetable oils. Yes, exactly. Remember, the ancient Greeks used to call the Egyptians artophagos, bread eaters. They used to call them bread eaters. That was like a pure translation, artophagos. So, yes. Yes, and that's the boron video. I just can't sleep for more than 5 hours a night recently, but feel quite fit during the day. Worrying? No, not if you're fine. I mean, prior to lights, the lights, humans used to sleep in 2 cycles. Like they went early because the sun had gone down and there was no lighting. Indoor lighting didn't exist. And people would go to sleep quite early. They would wake up at about 2 o'clock in the evening. They would do things around the home and then they would go for another sleep. So they had like 2 sleep cycles in the past. And some tribal people have that as well. And this is where they believe the night owl genetics came from and all that. So as long as you get, even if it's like 5 or 6, like low carb people, because they've got less inflammation, we require less sleep compared to carb eaters, which have more inflammation to deal with. So their sleep cycle becomes longer. But also past sleep cycles were these shorter sleep cycles. And the populations didn't get affected in any negative way. So obviously blue light in the evenings now with all the lighting and all that sort of stuff has really changed the, you could say, our sleep patterns and all that. Nobody knows whether it's, a good thing or a bad thing, or whether we should technically sleep at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock like our ancestors did, wake up at 2, do other things and all that, and then go back to sleep at around 3 or whatever, fall back to sleep and wake up early in the dawn, like 5-ish. So you're sort of like a 4 or 5 hour, then another 3 hours, and then you're basically up. So you could end up sleeping within those 2 cycles anywhere between 5 to 7 or 8 hours, depending how tired you were or many other things. So at this stage, we have no science, and we've changed our sleeping patterns as humans since we acquired indoor lighting and our lifestyles changed. Most of us seem to have adapted pretty well to it. So it's very unclear whether, obviously, blue light is a big issue in terms of sufficient melatonin to get deep enough sleep to basically have the recuperative to wake up rested. But if you're waking up rested, I wouldn't worry about it. The key thing is if you're getting up in the morning and you feel like rat shit, you've got a problem. But if you're getting up and you feel, sometimes I will sleep 6.5 hours and I get up and I'm refreshed fully. Like last night, I went at about 1, got up about 7 odd hours after, and I was completely refreshed. You can see how I'm performing normal. I'm not yawning. I'm not, I don't feel tired or anything. So I really think that if you're getting restful sleep, if you're on a species appropriate diet and you're not doing too many dumb things, you should technically be able to sleep, whatever amount of hours the body really wants to sleep. I think, just think, when you're sick, your body wants to sleep longer. Why? To rest and recover. If you've got less damage, you don't need to sleep as long. So, because what you're doing when you're sleeping is you're lowering that sort of metabolic sort of rate. You're less involved in building tissue or stuff like that. What are you doing? You're shifting towards upregulating the captor 1 and captor 2 pathways. There's all these organelles that get activated and pushed out through the cytosol to basically do a lot of repair work. So this is what we find when we've done tests on people and done biopsies of them and checked to see what are the organelle activities. It's upregulated. We see slightly more activity with these organelles inside the cell. So we know that definitely when you're sleeping, this reparative, cleaning up junk and cleaning out junk out of the cell and out of the mitochondria and all that is happening. So that's quite clear. We've got some research now to basically say that. So do we need how much sleep? See, some people that are excessively stressed out, and it may not even be the blue light, they may be just excessively stressed out and have high cortisol at night, and they just can't get their melatonin low enough to basically get that recuperative sleep. And as a consequence, they can sleep quite a few more hours than maybe you and me and still feel rat shit in the morning. Because I think we've had similar experience. I've had experience where I was sleeping, 8 and 9 hours, and I was still absolutely feeling tired as all day long on a carb-centric diet, on a sad diet. So I've been there. I think we've all been there to some extent. So I think that, we look at tribal people and they're up in the evenings, they do things around, and then they'll go back and nap for a couple of hours and take it in turns and all that. So there's definitely something that's happening there. Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that you could say historical information we've lost about past work-life balance, and you could say also sleep cycles and stuff like that have happened in the past that we're not as aware of today. I think if you ask anybody about the old sleep cycles, none of them know about it. Very few people do. Even this is when, after I had my heart disease and heart attack and all the other things, it was only slightly after that I started going down all these rabbit holes trying to understand all these different things because I was desperate to find out a way to survive. So I didn't give a shit, what worked or what didn't. I wasn't into any ism. I discarded all that nonsense and I said, I just want to know what works. I don't give a shit what it's called. And so for me, it was, what's the solution? And the rest is nonsense. So there is something to be said about that humans can adapt to a number of different sleep cycles. We see that further high latitudes, when you move into away from the tropics, sleep cycles are very different for people in these sort of northern latitudes and stuff like that. So there is something to be said about different parts where we live in different parts of the world, and obviously there's a combination of the inflammation that the diet causes, or the sort of diet. And most of these populations were more closely to a species appropriate diet in the past, especially in Scandinavia and stuff like that. It was fish, it was animals, very little grains that were available, and it was more like a treat, most of these things, rather than the actual food. It was dairy, fish, and meat mostly for a lot of these European populations for a very long time. And so their sleep cycles, their due to their animal husbandry and many other things, and also the night, the length of daylight and length of darkness through different periods of the year, that affected also their sleep cycles and many other things. So there's a lot of information that's been lost, unfortunately, and there are some people that have tried to bring back some of that knowledge. Unfortunately, it's here and there, and it's a lot of the books that do cover some of the old sleep cycles, they're not even published anymore. They're not in circulation. You have to go to a library to get them. So that's another problem. You do find some online sort of stuff, like reprints, but they're very rare. So there's a lot of knowledge that seems to have fallen between the cracks and has been lost, unfortunately. It just is what it is. Yes, Anika, yes, you do notice different, and that's due to calcium. So if you've got calcium genes, you will notice. If I basically, when I was paleo, I started having insomnia and couldn't sleep really well. I had really disrupted sleep cycles due to calcium deficiency. I didn't know then that I had the genetics, but that's what it was. So yes, that can be a problem. How much of the blue light do your glasses block? I've got a pair block 63. I think I need stronger ones. Yes, you do. Where did you buy yours from? Hold on, let me just type this in. There it is. Where are you located, Mats? Which part of the world are you located? Can you just put down which, because this has got different locations, their websites. So there's the Australian website, but there's the international one as well. So where are you located? There's a New Zealand, a UK, the New Zealand one. There's an Australian, New Zealand, Sweden. Okay, so you need the UK one. So the UK one covers all of Europe. I'll just switch it over to the UK one. So if you go all the way down to the bottom, it allows you. And they've got glasses, so just go to the blue light glasses and they'll actually show you the different types and stuff like that. Yes, they are slightly pricier, but they are better quality. So I've got these here that are the yellow ones. They've got they knock out 70% through the daytime when I'm looking at monitors on my computer. So 70% they 70 percentage. So that's quite a bit. Only 30% get through on these ones. That's the daytime. These ones, no blue light gets through, but green light gets through. And these red ones, then they knock out the and that's at about 9 o'clock because we're in daylight savings now. These knock out blue and the most of the green, which I'll put them on later in that regard. So that now the pagan cider. Happy Australia Day, Harry. That's become a bit warm. Anyway, I'll let you drink it faster, won't I? Gee, well, my spine has a lot of degeneration. Nearly all the discs of lumbar, thoracic area, vertebrae, and plate dysfunction throughout as well. 30 years. Will taurine help? Yes, it will. The biggest problem, look, spinal problems are really hard to deal with. Let me explain to you why. The spine, there's not a lot of blood vessels around the spine. There's your problem. Lack of sufficient blood vessels. So it's really hard to deal with this. Obviously, having more cholesterol, that means eggs. I would actually be eating minimum 12 eggs a day, minimum, with your condition. So I'd be packing in that. I would definitely be getting 6 grams with my minor meal. Your major meal, you'd probably get enough leucine. Minor meal in the evening, I would basically make sure it was like a yogurt, a plain yogurt, a Greek plain yogurt, no watery shit, and no sugars or anything like that. And I'd put into that because at night you absorb more calcium at night. So basically I'd be having that. I'd be putting leucine in it, 6 grams of leucine, and I'd also be putting taurine in as well, at least 4 grams. And that will amplify in the muscle skeletal, but in particular the skeletal, protein synthesis. Now, in terms of other things, I'd definitely be looking at injectable, not oral. Oral is really good for the collagen structures of the digestive tract. You know, your esophagus, your stomach, your small and large, intestines. That's fine for those. So your enteric system, the oral one is much better. But for specifically in like internal stuff, it's basically in the fat cells, like sticking it there, obviously getting alcohol wipes that wipe it clean, make sure it's really clean before you inject yourself. And if you find it difficult, find somebody that can inject you. There are some people that saying that injecting closer to the site is a better thing for certain conditions like backs, knees, and things like that. The problem is the person who does the injecting needs to know what they're fucking doing. They have to be professional or know, like a nurse or something like that. And trying to convince somebody to do that for you, especially if they're not on the same wavelength as you, could be an issue. Do you have a family member that has those skills? I'd utilise that. So I would use 3 months BPC 157 injectable. Go off it for 3 months. You can't be on it continuously. There are problems being on it continuously. You go off it for 3 months. You do another 3 months, and that's you're covered for half the year, and you don't do any until the next year. And you just do that every year in that sort of sequence: 3 months, 3 months off, 3 months on, and then the remainder of the year you're basically off it, and then you leave it for the next year. So that can be helpful. There are also certain. This is Chinese medicine. There's also this. What does it called? It's a sort of a surgical acupuncture. But this surgical acupuncture can affect both the nervous tissue and the tissue in those areas to sort of like a hormetic effect, which forces them to heal a bit faster, which can be useful for these sort of conditions. The other thing that can be also useful, that's important, is decompression. So there are some physiotherapists who use decompression methods that can be really useful. And there is this other technique, which is NRT, I think it's called. There's a lady who's associated with Bart Kay. What's her name? Jennifer, is it? Or I can't remember. Scotty, do you remember the video that Bart did with Jen recently? So they use a certain technique which seems to help with these sort of conditions as well. I don't know whether specifically for your type of conditions that would be useful or not. You could ask. I mean, you're 30, mate, and this sort of condition, trying everything and anything is well worth it in a sense. So that's how I would definitely approach it in that regard. But you need. I hope you're on a species appropriate diet. You're off all the carbs and crap and stuff like that, and you're eating more protein because you need more protein. Let's put it that way. So you're not going to build bones. My father is 90. He got hit by a car a year ago, well, slightly over a year, and didn't break any bones and anything, and not even a fracture at 90. Now, he's got the same genetics as me. We can't absorb calcium very well. But, what do we consume? Shitloads of meat, animal foods, calcium-rich foods like dairy, plus leucine, taurine to amplify the protein synthesis in the musculoskeletal. Very, very useful in that regard. So I'd also get like a colloidal trace mineral as well, because sometimes some people can be deficient in certain trace minerals in that regard. So get sort of colloidal minerals, or even better if you can get properly ionized mineral supplements and stuff like that. There are different brands out there that can be useful in that regard. So yeah, yeah. And on top of that, what's your mitochondrial health like? Were you consuming a lot of seed oils, a lot of industrial crap and stuff like that for a long time? That could have caused a lot of damage to your mitochondria. And I saw Chrissa there saying, methylene blue can help. Well, yes and no. There's a few issues with methylene blue, but that's for a future video and all that. But a short-term use could be useful for some people at a very low dose. But I would prefer people getting their taurine, increasing their melatonin inside their mitochondria, and actually healing the mitochondria via that melatonin pathway that it gets amplified by taurine. So if you're not on blood pressure meds, lithium, or any of these sort of, or blood sugar meds, or any of this sort of stuff that can be a problem, you could slowly jack up your levels, start at something a couple of grams and then just move up until you get about 12 grams. And if you can tolerate it, good. If you're having a few difficulties tolerating, you're sulfur sensitive, you may need to add a gram of choline into, or like half a gram in the earlier days of the early part of the day, and half a gram in the later part of the day, just to methylate some of the excess sulfur that your body can't utilize, just so you don't get any of that, a lot of that reaction, is more than anything else. Anyway, hi Harry, have you heard of methylene blue? Yes, I have. Far too many questions on methylene blue. Yes, it is a bit of an electron donor, but at the same time, if you've got a problem with the electron, with the ATPase flooding electrons through the electron chain, could basically increase the damage to the ATPase, which produces the ATP. So I'm not convinced that it's the right strategy. It can be potentially useful in lower doses, but I'm to be convinced in that regard. Give me a sec. I'm neglecting my sort of celebratory drink. Yes. I know people will argue what a great electron donor it is, and it's wonderful. Next best thing since sliced bread and all that. Yeah. But remember, it's certain conditions where we've used it. If you use excessive amounts, you'll get two things you'll notice. You'll get your urine will go very blue, and your skin as well could go like a bluish purplish sort of can actually thing. So you tend to know very quickly that you're having too much, and people react to it very differently. This is why I don't recommend it. I think if somebody's going to recommend it, in that regard, my biggest concern with things like methylene blue is that it can cause some issues with serotonin, potentially a condition called serotonin syndrome. So that doesn't happen in everybody. It has to do with genetics and all sorts of things. So I'm not, some other things are arrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmias, and they're dangerous as well. So, and this is why things that have got too much risk, unless you're properly supervised, it's properly done, properly measured. There are risks with it in that regard. So look, it's I can't I'm trying to remember what year did it the first. There was a physician that used it many years ago. There was there's some sort of genetic disorder that that some people get that has to do with something with oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells, something about the red blood cells getting damaged, uh, and there was also some health condition, where you went into emergency care in a hospital, and they'd give you methylene blue to sort of counteract that thing. So there was two sort of conditions that it was being used for. And for those conditions, under a physician that's been supervised, knows how they're using it and all that, I have no problems with that. But I do have a problem with a lot of people now jumping on this bandwagon and with things, and they don't know what their genetics are. They could have underlying genetics which maybe make them more prone to arrhythmias, make them more prone to some of these other side effects. And that's why I don't recommend it. I just don't recommend it because I think unless you're going to actually you're consulting with somebody and they're actually interacting with you, testing you, making sure that everything's fine, that there's no problems that are happening. Yeah, if it's a sort of a supervised use, but if it's just arbitrary recommendations, it's the next best thing since sliced bread, I get very cagey about that sort of behaviour of some people. It seems like there's some new product I need to push. It's got some magical properties. I don't see any Maasai, any Hadza who live very long and healthy lives taking methylene blue. Do you? So I do have concerns. Maybe short-term use. Yeah, potentially have some. My concern in the mitochondria is it helping sort of mask by just pushing more electrons, but what if there's more deuterium still inside and you haven't deuterium depleted sufficiently? Then you could be basically pushing through the electron chain is working slightly stronger, pumping in all these ions, these protons and neutrons into mitochondrial membrane space, where you're getting these sort of proton sort of gradient increased plus neutron gradient. Protons are fine, the neutrons are the problem. They are the ones that slow down the nanomachine, the complex 5, the ATPase, the thing that creates ATP. And then you can also have more damage to that by accelerating that, forcing it to work faster with more, inappropriate ions coming through, and that could then damage that machinery faster. So you may get an initial benefit, and then you may get more damage. So I'm yet to be convinced that it's a good idea to take it long term, even for the mitochondria. So I'm very cagey about it, to be honest. I would rather basically use, to lower oxidative stress, use taurine, and also taurine that actually acts as a cofactor to enzymes that actually increase melatonin inside the mitochondria, as they do for your pituitary gland. Taurine helps increase even for your night purpose. It's important for the synthesis, so to speak, of melatonin. It's part of the, as a component in the synthesis, and the same thing for the mitochondria. So I'd rather have those things slightly upregulated to heal these things, rather than using these, which is a dye, an industrial dye, using an industrial dye to try and hard manipulate. I would rather that the enzymes and all that are using things that they are, there are taut, TAUT, taut or taurine transporters in the body. So that's a natural substance that exists in animal foods and is synthesized in the body, but not enough. The Pottinger's cat issue, it's due to cooking taurine deficiency. That's what it is. And they synthesize bugger all, if any, the cats, and that's why they do suffer all those problems. But the actual, for us, I would rather go down that pathway than put something foreign that is not natural to the body and potentially could create other side effects long term if overused. Short term for certain conditions, yeah, not a problem under physician supervision, but long term, or a practitioner that know what they're doing. But long term, I do have question marks on whether it's valuable. I personally have never taken it, and I won't be taking it. And so that's my bit in that regard. What you do is your business in that regard, but I value the health of my mitochondria and the health of my body, and I'm not going to play a Russian roulette with something like that. I notice a big difference in sleep with, exactly. Oh, we've covered that earlier, Sweden. And that, can thermal mineral water help spine degeneration? probably a hermetic effect, but I don't know of any mechanism. So obviously, if you're in, thermal mineral water, you're absorbing trace minerals, and so technically speaking, if you're deficient in certain trace minerals, yes, it can be useful. But you could also, what I said earlier, you could get a trace mineral supplement. So, but yeah, these things have value, but they're not a panacea. They're not going to reverse the condition. All they are is something that can be just minuscule. The diet is the most important, and all these other things are minuscules. Do tribal people do them? No, they don't. But we're not tribal people. We've had endured more damage. So every little bit can sometimes be useful. But we have to be careful what little bits, because if we use the wrong little bits, we could reverse any gains that we get, the small gains from other things. So, which is important. Is sparkling, worse or better for the body? I don't consume sparkling water and never will. We don't have really any research, but and I don't think we need to hydrate too much. We hydrate far too much. Tribal people don't drink any water. Very rarely do they get from leaves, which is deuterium depleted. So most of it is actually the production of metabolic water from beta oxidation. So that's how humans get it, and they upregulate their antidiuretic hormones naturally. And so their requirements also for electrolytes go down, because now they've got their taurine receptors, their taut transporters in their nephrons, in their kidneys working well and being regulated properly by these antidiuretic hormones, and so they recover fluids much better and electrolytes as well. So the requirement for then electrolytes goes down. So the more fluids you put in, you're actually just, forcing your body to excrete too many electrolytes. So not a good idea. And I can tell you, beyond my coffee drinking and the occasional abuse that happens on celebratory days, I'm probably having a litre just from the coffee. Primarily, it's primarily from the coffee and the milk. I'm probably having about a litre. So, and some days if I don't have any, or just one coffee or that, I may only end up having like 300-400 mils, like less than half a pint, or you know, 0.3 of a 0.35 of a litre. So 350 to 400 mils. So, and a pint is about 0.902, I think, of a litre. So, can't remember exactly. I think I may be wrong. Yes. So just keep that in mind. So, yes, we do not need these excess hydration. And Tim Noakes has done a video on that, on what is, he's got a book that he published a few years back called Waterlogged. I looked at some research, some paleo research years ago, based on a number of the tribal people, like the Sand people of the Kalahari, and a few other populations, and saw quite clearly these people were in desert type environments, and they had no water with them whatsoever. They were consuming far more fat than many other tribal people, and they were just producing more metabolic water internally from the fat. So remember, 1 gram of fat will give you 1.1 grams of water. 1 gram of sugar will only give you 0.44, so 44%. Now you understand why on a sugar-based diet you need more water. That's why agriculturalists drink water. Got it? Because they feel thirsty, because they're not producing internally sufficient water. It's not magical. We produce in ATP our entire, so if we're, let's say, 70 kilos or 50 kilos, you'll produce 50 or 70 kilos of ATP in 24 hours if you've got healthy mitochondria. Got it? So all that production is going to generate a lot of metabolic water. So as long as you don't have high insulin and you can access that fat and oxidize it, and basically when you're not eating and produce a lot of metabolic water, you're fine. My piss is sometimes, and even I just have 1 litre or half a litre, and my piss is still can be slightly, when I have a litre, it gets on the lighter form. And when I basically have only like less than half a pint, or about 350 to 400 mils, I notice myself that my urine gets a bit of colour. So that water that I'm putting in, even that, like half a pint is too much, and it's making my water much more more discoloured. More more plain, more clear. Clear isn't good, guys. Look at any animal that's pissing out. No animal, none in nature, has urine that is clear. It's always slightly it's not dark, but it's this yellowy, deep yellowy colour. That's normal. We've forgotten what normal is, and we consume far too many things because it's part of our habit, our lifestyle, and that's why our urine isn't as yellowish, which is the normal thing, because that's what every other animal, if you look at their urine, is yellowy. Modern humans, because they consume far too much water, that's the reason, and that's why they're waterlogged. Too much with high insulin, they're carrying too much water inside the cells, which is that's what increases blood pressure. That's what increases damage to the cells as well, and increases senescence and aging. So, not a good idea. Try to give up your water addiction, I would say, mate. You're welcome. And, if you upregulate your antidiuretic hormones, you won't get any cramps or anything. It's the excess water that's dumping out the electrolytes, and then you're getting the cramps. And not eating enough meat to maintain a bit of a slightly higher insulin due to that, which sort of, together with the increase in taurine supporting the antidiuretic hormones, because there's a relationship with taurine and the transporters that actually regulate part of the antidiuretic hormones. So that's why we say you've got to eat enough meat. We criticise Saladino and people like that. You're not eating enough. This is the problem with the low carb community. They think that low carb is eating a lot of fat. Look at tribal people. They eat shitloads of meat. They love eating meat. They don't have a fear of meat like we do. That's our problem. And that's why they're more muscular, more stronger, more robust. They've got stronger bones because, what are bones? Mineralized collagen. Collagen requires protein. You only protein synthesis about 32%. The rest, where do you think it goes? It goes into the organs. It goes for produce the metalloproteins that transport ions around, the other proteins and polypeptides that do a lot of different biological functions, plus the enzymes that do a lot of breaking down and building things all over the body. You need extra protein for that as well. You're going to transcript things. So, yes, unfortunately, We don't realise that. We need more. Yes, please hit the like. Tap the like. Whatever you like, just hit it. What's your opinion on Eugene metal colloids? Thanks. I don't know the brand, so I can't give you an opinion. Yes, I use a local Tasmanian brand from King Island, which is a trace mineral. So I just don't know about every brand in the world, so sorry. Oops. Is that going to happen? Click. Thank you, Mats. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I can't put that colourful thank you character on the screen because it just StreamYard doesn't do it properly. Unfortunately, which is annoying. Anyway, thank you very much for the Swedish 106, or I don't know what your currency is, but thank you very much anyway for the donation. I like colloidal silver. Okay. Look, I did use colloidal silver once in my life, I have to say, just to deal with a gut infection many years ago. It did seem to work. It allowed me then to put some probiotics back and sort of normalise things, but I didn't do it for long. I only did it for 2 weeks or whatever, and then the rest I threw out. Um, and again, because I knew that it had certain benefits in dealing with some of the pathogenics, but I wasn't willing to do long term again because I have concerns about these things. That it's a bit like plants. They've got medicinal properties. You use them, but they also have long term use, have negative properties. So you don't use plants continuously. Use them for medicinal, for hermetic effects for short term. It's like warming up your leg. Why would you warm up your leg? Because you want to inflame it slightly to force the body to bring in a lot of immune cells and to also do angiogenesis where you're growing new blood vessels in the area which allow nutrients to come in and help the healing process. So there is time to use certain techniques, but overusing can be a problem. Like too much hormesis can actually end up creating like chronic low-grade inflammation, chronic stress, low-grade stress. These are not good. So that's why I'm not into the hormesis craze either, because no tribal person ever has done that. But short-term, to sort of like create an upregulation of heat shock proteins and a bit of histamine reaction in certain tissue to force the body to basically have an interest in dealing with something and looking into it, can be useful as a bit of a hack. But continuously, yeah, it could be potentially a problem. So I definitely wouldn't do that. Is sparkling 200 depleted water okay? Just get plain stuff, Anika. Just plain stuff. Don't get the sparkling stuff, just the plain stuff. If you've already bought it, use it, but try and get the plain stuff next time. Don't know why they produce sparkling stuff. It is annoying. O2 carbon, EZ water, CO2, ATP. Oh, is this an advertising thing? DC and all that. Is that what it is? Is it advertising? Depends on the food. Fat gives more. You you can't weigh ATP energy the way you breathe out, or the sweat, urinate. These are all estimates, proxy measurements, like I said earlier. So no, they aren't very accurate. That's true, and all that in that regard. But easy water is we create under certain conditions. Like if you earth yourself, you will generate something equivalent to this viscous type water, this sort of easy water in your body, but you have to have, there has to be specific, there are magnetic fields in it. There are specific conditions within the tissues that can generate these things, these negative charges. There, so you can't bottle this stuff. There are people that claim that they can, but I consider that bullshit, because at the subatomic level, you couldn't actually maintain that structure. It would collapse because you no longer have the conditions that are in the human body, so to speak. But through earthing, through vasodilation, like more with nitric oxide by eating animal foods that have got, or using citrulline supplementation, you can increase the way the body uses and manipulates water. There's another side to this sort of easy type water, as it's called. Taurine plays a role because it manipulates water. So that's why species appropriate diet is much better, because it is able to manipulate these layers much better and sustain them and maintain them. Taurine also can manipulate the water molecules inside the body to control protein folding, which the main thing, it's actually considered probably the most important in terms of longevity aging. One of the most important things that taurine does is improve protein folding inside the body. So that's one of its probably magical things. It's called by the biophysicists that have looked at this and actually done the experiments and actually proven that it does happen. They have sort of dubbed it that taurine has an anti-entropic effect. Entropy that breaks things down in the universe, an anti-entropic effect, they call it. So anyway, that's what one of them did call it, so to speak. I agree, plants can be medicines and poison, but not food, exactly. So we've got to be very careful with these things. I'm not hostile to plant compounds. Oh, that went down nicely, didn't it, Harry? Ugh. I'll drink it faster because it's getting warm. Anyway. I'm trying to avoid choking. It's a family thing with me. My auntie actually died from choking, and I tend to choke very easily as well. So did my mother. So yes, much more narrower sort of pathway. It's just is what it is. Yes, multiple generations of inappropriate eating creates some of these bad conditions in genetics. So, Andy, how are you, mate? Yeah, so I mean, we've got to be very careful when it comes to a lot of the supplemental stuff. You do? Yeah, look, some people have got it's much more narrow, and I've got in particular when you see people with shorter necks, that's another thing where people with longer necks have less of a problem from what I've been told. Maybe it's bullshit. It could be, but yeah, my mum used to choke very easily. So do I. Um, I have to be careful when I speak and drink or eat. That's when it usually happens. So I seem to not be able to coordinate those things very well. So yeah, I have to remind myself to shut the fuck up when I'm eating or drinking. So yeah, I'm a bit more susceptible to it. Yes. But getting back to sort of when it comes to supplements and all that, always think about supplements as a short-term intervention to deal with a deficiency, or because it's required for a specific condition. I think I heard somebody, I didn't actually answer, I probably should have, but on Bart K's live feed, I just went back through and I just took a look at a few of the questions people asked because I came on it very late. And somebody said, "Oh, I really feel better when I actually eat now that I'm back on pork. Wasn't feeling that great." And there's always the possibility that people are not getting enough, from the pork itself, is a very good source of both thiamine and niacin. And sometimes people may not, depending on the cuts of meat, if they're eating the same cuts of meat every single day, no tribal person would have done that. Tribal people would have eaten whatever was available. So they'd be eating a varied type of animals in the environment. And so they'd be getting a very different mineral, micronutrient type of composition from these, fatty acid composition, many other things. Some species will have more some of the omegas, the essential fatty acids, others less, but they'd be getting a variety. And that's why I say try to eat a variety of animal foods as long as you can tolerate them. Don't restrict yourself too much into, because there is the potential, depending on your genetics, because there are genetic differences, especially even non-tribal genetics, like pastoral genes and many others that we've had due to, thousands of years of agriculturalist domestication and stuff like that. So we need to keep in mind we're not like the Hudsons or the Maasai, and that's why some people then eat these things. They go, "I feel much better." Well, maybe it's more in kin because if you look at, I'll give you an example. I know people that have come from northern China and southern China. The ones that from northern China that are carnivore, if they eat like beef and things like that, they feel much better. If they eat chicken or pork or whatever, they don't feel as good. And the southerners, Cantonese from the south, they don't feel as good. Like I don't, for me, beef doesn't do it. But if I eat pork, lamb, things like that, I feel much better, really much better in that regard. And I probably need more of the specific nutrients where somebody else may slightly less. So there is these variations in that regard. So you got to be very, very careful with these sort of things. Yes, we have to have a good variety of fats. That's really important. Every year in Japan around the new year, they have mochi toll the number of people dying from choking on mochi every year. Mochi is a paste used for desserts made from mashed rice. Okay, interesting. Yeah, yeah. Certain foods can actually cause more of this sort of, choking condition. That's true in that regard. But yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, things like this are really hard to get down the esophagus, even with people that have got just wider esophagus. Where some people have a bit more difficulty, especially this because it is like it's like gluey and really tight, and if you're consuming it very quickly, large pieces, it can get lodged. It makes sense, and it's more sticky because of this. This mash type would be more sticky because of that. The way when the rice starch is sort of broken up, it has a stickiness to it. That's why they use it like a paste sometimes. Not only that, the Chinese actually use it as mortar in their, the Great Wall of China. The brick works in between. It's rice-based, all that mortar. That's how sticky it is. So, yeah, I can understand why if people are consuming too much, too quickly, of large parts of this sticky stuff, it could stick in their throat and cause a problem for them, a choking. And that would be much more difficult compared to a bone or something like that. A bone, you could turn the person upside down, hit them on the back, and it'll pop out. But that could actually lodge in there and be a big problem. So, yes, somebody should invent a rice extractor or something that you can, with a suction thing, you can put on the mouth of the person. They can suck the damn thing that's stuck in the throat. So it's probably the only way of dealing with that problem. Yeah, that'd be frightening. Yes, interesting. Very interesting. I make sure to get some variety now. Just seems logical. Yeah, it is. It is. And I always say, what did your ancestors eat as well? And I notice if you're Northern European, you're going to eat more fish, eat more ruminants. That's really what your ancestors consumed. Um, if you're further south, lamb, goat, pork, uh, depending on the area, maybe chicken and eggs a bit more. So there's some variation. You notice in the south, I've never heard of a Greek having like an egg allergy, but in the north, yes, you do, because people ate more fish and ruminants rather than eggs. There was less smaller animals in the harsh climates were much harder to survive in that environment. So they had less exposure to those specific animal foods. So, less adaptation. So it makes logical sense why people have better tolerances to certain things. Obviously, we've had now a couple of thousand years of domestication, and that's also helped adapt people to some of these foods as well. But still, there is a proportion of the population that still have sensitivities. Give you an example: salicylates. Many people that went on low carb diets had all these funny sort of reactions and were saying, where's it coming from? Well, what they didn't realize is a lot of them were moved away from olive oil. They didn't want to go to animal fats, moved away from things like that. And guess what they were consuming? Take a wild guess. See if you can work it out. What was the popular fat that people were using a few years back in the paleo days? I'll see whether somebody can pick it up while I'm drinking. Come on, put on your thinking caps. If this old fart at 58 can keep up with limited sleep, I expect you guys to basically be, showing some stamina. No takers? It's a rounded thing that falls off a tropical tree. Still no takers. God almighty. You guys are either drunk as skunks on Australia Day, that is, the Aussies, and the rest of yous are going, what is he talking about? Oh, 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 God. You're a coconut. Yes, it is coconut. Coconut oil and stuff like that. What are coconuts? High in salicylates. Southern Europeans have adapted to plants with high salicylates. Not a problem. Northern Europeans, not many of them have. And a lot of people getting reactions, and they didn't know what was causing it. And it was salicylates in the coconut products that they were using. So you'll find a sizable amount of Northern Europeans that have got underlying low-grade inflammation, and they can't work out what it is. And it's usually the coconut oils and the other coconut products that are in a lot of the, your protein bars and whatever else. Yeah. So, yes, you're not tropical beasts anymore. So you got to be very, very careful in that regard. 0, Mats, 0. Yeah. So where I've never heard of a person in the south having a salicylate problem, or in Southeast Asia, or in parts of the Middle East, because they've been exposed to salicylates for a very, very long time. Definitely not in India. You won't find any in the subcontinent. But you will find in areas like in Siberia, Northern Europe, in those sort of areas. It's a mixed bag in Central Asia. The further north you go, yes, you'll find some people. Further south you'll go that are exposed to more plants that have salicylates in them. They have a better adaptation to those things. And so a lot of people were just scratching their head. They couldn't work it out what it was for a number of years. And then I came across an article that actually said, oh, it's salicylates. And I go, well, and there was some naturopath, I can't even remember his name now, that started talking about it. And it started sort of getting through. And some people, but even to this day, a lot of people in the paleo world and the low carb world have still got no idea about salicylates. So, no, MCT oil does not contain the salicylates, no, because it's just pure fatty acids they've extracted. Look, I can't say none completely. There could be trace amounts, potentially. There could be trace amounts, but it's unlikely to have a lot of them get purified, very little, if any. So, yeah, I don't think you need MCT. This is another thing with MCT oils. I'm trying to remember. The Polynesians have. There's a gene. What is that gene? It's a couple of genes, but there's one primary one. Anyway, they have some genetics which allow them to handle high amounts of MCT, of medium chain triglycerides. So they have less sensitivity to medium chain triglycerides. Europeans, on the other hand, have more, especially Northern Europeans, more sensitivity to medium chain triglycerides. And so they can actually get certain reactions to medium chain triglycerides. So it's much harder for us. Southern Europeans do much better because they've been exposed to goat milk from, for a very long time. And goat milk tends to have a lot of medium chain triglycerides as well. So people are better adapted. So people like myself have less of a problem. Northern Europeans have a bit more sensitivity to too much. And it seems also to have a negative effect on their gut microbiome as well for Northern Europeans, MCT. So, because it does have some antibacterial effects and stuff like that. But it seems that the utilization is much easier with Southern Europeans and other people. And it may be, I don't know exactly why there's that difference. I'm speculating that it possibly is that you don't absorb as well, and more of it remains in the gut, causing some of these issues. Is my sort of speculation, but there's no science to prove anything on that front. But there is definitely a sensitivity there with medium chain triglycerides for Northern Europeans and North Asians, Inuit, people like that. A lot of the Africans as well have sensitivity. They don't have good adaptation at all, unless they're Northern Africans, which have some exposure to some of these things, to goat in particular. So the populations in the Middle East and the areas that, like North Africa, and along the part of Eastern Africa, you're sort of the Swahili type people's regions. those sort of things, they've had more exposure to goat milk and goat products for far longer, but goat milk in particular, and that's helped them to basically have a certain level of adaptation to medium chain triglycerides, to those medium chain fatty acids, where most people in sort of parts of West Africa, in particular Central Africa and more southern parts, have less exposure, so they're a bit more sensitive to those, like the Northern Europeans. So it depends on the regions and the exposure to those specific types of fatty acids over a very long period of time. Because most humans, our exposure is more with saturated fats, MUFAs and PUFAs, and saturated fats, more of the long chain ones, like palmitate, stearic acid, those ones, and less these sort of medium chain ones, which we find in coconut products and most of them, because most of these fatty acids are names which relate to to goats because they're in goat milk. So yeah, and that's potentially the reason. Like, a small amount isn't an issue, but a large amount can be a problem for depending on the person and stuff like that. Anyway, where were we? We were meant to eat local. Yep, shipping foods from around the world available all day is not natural. True. Yep, it isn't. So, I mean, I pretty much eat locally here in Tasmania. So I get all my stuff locally, Tasmanian produced stuff. I support the local economy, and at the same time, I get good local produce. So I'm happy. Done. So, spot on DC. Food mileage in modern times. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it, is refrigerated. It's not fresh. I prefer just getting local 'cause it's going to be fresher. Between the farm to the home, it's going to be a shorter period of time. So that's another thing. It's going to be fresher. It's going to have a better nutrient profile. Um, so yeah, and also you're supporting the local industries in your areas, where you're living. So you get a benefit. It increases the GDP, the wealth of that area that you live in. So be mindful of that, because in an indirect way you're helping yourself as well and your family. My mum has tomatoes every day of the year. My dad had raspberries every day of the year. Yeah, look, yeah, plenty of our parents did that. I know. Look, if you're not having too many bad things, it's how much. Well, now, happy Australia Day 2025, Harry. Greetings from Toronto. Thanks. Greetings as well back. And is there any evidence to suggest people in tropical climates with tropical genes could benefit from a little local fruit? They've got probably a better adaptation to fructose in compared. If you take a look at a lot of Southeast Asians, and only when the refined sugar came out did they start putting on weight, even though they have two seasons, fruit seasons. They tend to be quite leaner, but they are tofies, a lot of them, remember. They don't have as many fat cells because they don't need them. They're in a warmer climate, so they don't need that thermal protection like in colder climates. So they probably can tolerate it a bit better. That's right. But also you have to think about, I've actually in Indonesia, I've gone to the mountains and I've had like old, like fruit, which is seasonal, but it's wild, and you can only get it in certain months. And I remember one thing that Mira got for me. and it was a specific type of fruit that only comes out twice a year, specific periods, and we were just in that season. And it's these little, tiny little things. They're orangey things, and you just peel them off and you eat. It's quite a tasty thing. It's got a very big seed, and it's just got a small little bit of fruit on it. It's very little, and I had the domesticated one in Bali, and that was really sweet, and this one was very tart. And I go, "Ooh, this is tart," but I actually enjoyed it because it wasn't. I'm more of a savoury person. I don't like sweet things, and I thought it was going to be sweet. And I go, "Oh, Mira, I don't want this." And she goes, "Try this. It's more to your liking." I say, "Okay." I tried it, and it was. It was tart, and it wasn't as sweet. So it was interesting, in that regard. But that's the difference between a wild plant that only grows seasonally and a domesticated plant that grows all year round. It's not the same. And the wild ones are very tart. They've got very little sugar. They tend to have a lot of seeds, a lot of pips, really large pips with very little. You have to sort of grind it a bit off, whatever small amount. You don't get much of a fruit, and that's really what people had just seasonally. It's really the plant's just trying to reproduce itself. In bananas, we've killed off reproduction completely. They're all clones, because that's the only way of getting rid of the seeds and making them very sweet in the way they are. That's domestication for you. So, and it's the reason why they needed so many pesticides to keep the bugs away, so to speak, where the wild ones don't have that problem. They naturally are far more adaptable in their environment. So, yeah, I know what you mean. But as I said, even the locals, they're getting overweight, too much sugar and stuff like that. They're getting unhealthy. Diabetes is just exploding in Southeast Asia, believe me. So since back in 2006, you still had about 3 million out of the 200 plus million Indonesians in the middle class. And then there was an explosion of the middle class, and something that I did predict. I did tell my mirror that this would basically happen. It did happen over a few years, when Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono opened up the economy at the time, and he was an ex-general that took over, and it sort of ushered this big growth in the economy, and the middle classes grew out to about over 80 million within a couple of years, and then that's sort of, I think now it's way over. I think it's close to half the population now. So yes, Indonesia is doing much better on that front in development terms. Anyway, move on. These are a big difference between goat and sheep milk. In the fatty acid composition, is the primary thing. There is some differences, minor differences in the amino acid composition, but it's more the fatty acid composition where the biggest differences are. So goat milk will have more medium and short chain type fatty acids compared to sheep milk will have slightly more MUFA and slightly more long chain saturated ones. But it's not like dramatic. These are small differences in that regard. So Jonathan's here. G'day, Jonathan. Good to see you, mate. And avocado. What about avocado? Anyway, yes. If you enjoy it, I'm not gonna spank you. But Ted may. Ted, that evil Ted from New Zealand land, crossbreeding with sheep. Very nasty character. Very nasty. I'd be very careful about that bloke. Um, much in line with the ancient fruits all over the world. Really, then, yeah. Look, I've even looked at, like when I was in Greece as a youngster, up in the village in the mountains, I'd actually consumed some like fruits that originated. These were wild ones, which were just only seasonal, came out for a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks, well, probably 2.5 to be more precise. And these were little berries and stuff like that, and that was it for the year. And they were very tart, there was no sweetness to them. It was just it was like a sweet and sour type thing, but a very mild thing in that regard. So, you know, domesticated stuff is completely different from ancient stuff, and as well. So even earlier domesticated stuff wasn't as sweet as modern stuff that we have today. Yes, there's a dramatic difference. Let me put it that way. Because even in Indonesia, I was giving you an example. When you get the little bananas, they're not like the actual the old wild bananas. So wild bananas are very little things, very small little things like that, and they tend to have shitloads of seeds. You're literally just trying to get rid of seeds to get anything, and it's not very sweet at all. The early domesticated stuff, they still have those in Indonesia, and they tend to be slightly bigger, about that long, about that wide, and about that long. They're short in a sense. They have quite a few seeds in them, but not as many as the other, and they tend to be slightly sweeter, but not as sweet as a full-grown domesticated plant. That's the more modern bananas, as we call them. So you can still buy these short, sort of skinny, slightly slightly seedy, but not that sort. Um, type of bananas in Southeast Asia still. So the early varieties, because some of the older people still like them, you know, in that regard, because they grow in their region and yeah. But again, it's not something that we naturally, yes, had. Jonathan, very seedy, yes, exactly. uh, yes, that's the sort of old stuff that we used to have in that regard. I mean, if you look in North America, you probably won't find much of the early varieties. Even when it comes to apples, the old apples were very tart. Even the early domesticated apples, like the Granny Smiths, the old traditional Granny Smiths, not the modern variety, which are much sweeter. But even those green apples, the earlier ones, were very tart. And they originate from these little things that are that small that are very tart and have very little sugary or taste to it. They're sort of a sweet and sour, a very mild thing, the really wild stuff, and they don't grow for very long. Where the other stuff, and it would have been like a treat for our ancestors, not food. So, this sort of nonsense that people say is just completely and utterly nonsense. And it's the same thing, the the last probably less than what is it, about 80 odd years, the level of hybridization, the level of improvements in domestication and all that have created plethora of varieties and a hell of a lot more sugary varieties as well. So, yes, definitely catering for the sweet tooth of most of the population nowadays. Crab apples. There used to be bushes of them around here when I was a kid, but not anymore exactly. And it's the same thing I'm finding that around villages in Southeast Asia and many, because I do travel in this part of the world, I find that a lot of the old varieties, even some of the old domesticated, not only the wild stuff, is being diminished, is being lost, because you've got a lot of intensive agriculture, a lot of clearing of areas, and that's also they're pretty much at a very rapid pace, I would say, in some parts of Southeast Asia, clearing out and destroying a lot of their, you could say, their ancient type of plants, which the amount of, you could say, ancient plants, both edible and non-edible, in that part of the world, are being lost. So there's a lot of, plant species loss at the moment that's happening in this rapid sort of agricultural phase that we're going through in these parts of the world, where they're trying to support bigger populations, and there is a massive amount of domesticated, the modern domesticated intensive farming, and a lot of pesticide-based agriculture that's actually happening in many of these parts. So, and it's not good for the farmers either. There's the amount of ailments, health issues, and all that. The farmers in these regions have been going up now for the last couple of decades, and it's definitely not a good sign for those sort of populations or the people of those countries. But yes, agriculture is for slave food, very much so. And yes, monocrop, yeah, pretty much, which is very intensive and very, diversity is just out the window pretty much in most of these countries, which is unfortunate because there are still beautiful places in Southeast Asia that haven't really been destroyed or altered in a severe way, but they're decreasing, let's put it that way. Um, I'm hoping that people will wake up and realise before too much damage has been done. There are a number of people that are starting to realise that and starting to push back on some of this stuff, which is good. But it's still hard in those sort of societies where you've still got a certain level of, underdevelopment, poverty and stuff like that. And it's really hard for people to be concerned about those issues when they're trying to make sure that their kids are being fed, getting a good education and stuff like that. I can sympathise. I'm not critical at all of the people and the circumstances they find themselves in. I'm just critical about how these things happen and why they happen. So it is what it is. Anyway, Jonathan, what tips do you have to increase food intake for someone trying uh, to because of uniquely large blobs of muscle? Like yourself, mate, like yourself? Is that what you're saying? Like yourself? Look, the thing is, you can only get so much food in um, per day in that regard. Obviously, if we cook meat, we can consume more meat. That's quite clear. The more you cook a meat, yes, it's probably less palatable in that regard, but the more well done a meat is, the easier it is to put down far more of it. The more raw it is, or undercooked, it's much harder to put more down. It's simple as that. It's a reason why a lot of tribal people tend to cook most of their meat well done. They don't undercook it. It's the only ones that tend to do that a bit. A 10 population who've got so much, they don't really worry about the concern that they're not going to get enough. So, if you're trying to get more volume in, you definitely need to cook it, reduce the moisture in it, so you can actually take in more. Simple as that. It's not as palatable. That's true, but that's one thing. I mean, I don't know whether you can access whey protein in its, not the, the isolate stuff and all that. I'm talking about the actual stuff that you get from a farmer, combining that with the meat will have an amplifying effect as well. I mean, the taurine stuff, we've talked about it, how to combine those sort of things to amplify the signaling. It's really ultimately to do it that way, because even in a fasted way, you can throw in loose and still get an anabolic effect. Um, it's all a question of amplification. But my go-to, if I'm basically going to prioritize how much aminos can I get into the muscles, to keep those muscles large in that regard, I'm going to utilize food that's going to have the highest level of protein synthesis, and that's eggs. So how many eggs are you having? I mean, I know there's a bit of a problem now with the egg supply and everywhere, even here. It took me a while. I didn't have any eggs last week. I got 2 packs just yesterday, which is bloody annoying. And I had to get last time I had to get the 600 rather than the 700 ones. The mills, that's how they package them. So you get about 50 grams per egg, or you get the well over that amount. So for me, eggs are the ultimate. There is a supplement that I can't remember the company now. I can look it up for you. But what they do is they produce, and I've used it for people. I recommended it a number of years ago to someone, probably 3 years ago. So I'd have to look it up and find it. But it's a supplement where it has the amino profile it's nearly 100%. All of it gets utilized for protein synthesis. That's not normal, you know. So the composition of all the different aminos are exactly to get mostly that. Now, obviously, that means you're going to be denying your body enough aminos for the organs to grow, for the enzymes, the polypeptides, the protein transporters. All these things require protein amino acids to be constructed as well. It's not just the muscles and the bones, where you get that 32% from meat and 40. What is it? 40. It's 48 to 49, depending on the egg type. It varies, which is utilised of the aminos for protein synthesis. But for this supplement has close to, well, they claim it's close to about nearly 100%. It all goes to protein synthesis. Obviously, if you were just having this and no other food, that would be a very bad thing, because you wouldn't have enough for the, your enzymes and all the other stuff that you need, as I said. But in terms of, like, if you're going to use like a supplement, a protein supplement, I wouldn't use the other stuff. No fucking way. Because most of it's 17%. All the supplements out there only have 17% of that for protein synthesis. You'd have to whack quite a bit down, which is very costly if you're doing it every day. But this product, you can use far less, and it just has close to 100%. It has the proper composition. I just have to find it, and I'll send you the info where to get it. And that can be a bit of a cheat for you bodybuilder types, but also for people that have got like severe sarcopenia, where I'm having to give them this together with taurine and leucine supplementation to sort of try and amplify as much as possible to speed up the recovery from severe sarcopenia and severe sort of osteoporosis type conditions, turning things around fast. I don't think the majority of people need such supplements, but some people in extreme cases require extreme solutions. Apparently, you bodybuilder types seem to have an extreme appetite as well. Yes, you know who you are, don't you, Jonathan? Uh, um, I'm, uh, I'm asking because I'm redlining food intake at about 2 kilograms a day. So he wants the maximum result. You get it? Which is fair enough. He's heading in for cheers, Harry. Great tips. I've got food volume down to 2 kilograms with slow cooking brisket, raw egg, and dairy, ice cream, butter. I actually got some ice cream today, carnival ice cream from Hello Kitty, my next door neighbour. She brought it over. Very nice of her. Butter and whey bits. Can do that. 1 or 2 eggs a day at the moment. All right. It's just VI flares. Okay, fair enough. I'll find that because that supplement because it can be useful for it's a good cheat. Let's put it that way. Um, for you anabolic people that really love. Um, uh, well, it's not exactly. Well, you're not. It's not like you're using steroids, but it's it's not something you would find naturally in anything or any other standard supplement. Try duck eggs or even goose eggs. I'd love to be able to get ostrich eggs. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yes, I've never had any of the exotic eggs, so I can't really say. Duck eggs, yes. I've never had goose eggs. I don't know why. I just haven't. Chicken and ducks is probably the only things that I have had. Never ostrich or emu or anything like that. So just hasn't happened. I must live a sheltered life in Tassie. No emus here, no ostriches. So yeah, bit unfortunate. So, and it would be very hard to import those with all the damn restrictions. Tasmania's got a lot of environmental, you know. Remember, we had the environmental movement actually originates down here in Australia. One of the biggest, even the Green Party originates in Tasmania. Yes, I know. Oh well. So, and I know a lot of these people as well. Why? Because when I was a youngster, I was into that left wing shit. And I used to provide computer support to the Environment Centre in Bathurst Street in Tasmania. So, yes, I used to be there techie. And I used to connect with a dial up thing, a 14.4 bits back then, the little sort of, yeah, dial up. Oh, those were the days. Uh, God, brings back interesting memories. I started in Brisbane on rare, as rare steaks. Most rare. Practice with the bones of chickens. That's how I actually used a lot of the chicken bones, crunching all their ends and all that. And when you get the sort of the legs parts, which is the more has more menaquinones and a lot of stuff, and I usually use those. And a bit more fat and stuff like that, so it's much less leaner, and that's better for me anyway. And so I was also the bones. I was just gnawing at them, and I can tell you by doing that long enough, now my teeth just can cut like they're really strong, which is good. So yes, our ancestors used to gnaw on bones. Yes. It's another reason why I buy chops because I gnaw on them, and that gnawing actually strengthens your teeth as well. Yes. Mhm. some bones. Okay, you guys are talking about that. So what are you paying? Yeah, about £9 or so. Okay. Yeah, a lot of things have gone up for you guys as well. Yeah, see you, mate. Yeah, I'll find out the information and I'll send it to you. Those eggs are phenomenal. Are they? I've never tried them. Duck ones I have, chicken ones obviously everyone I think has. Uh, most memorable life experience. Okay, I'll have to try and get some somewhere. I went to the store today after I had lunch with Dad. Had to get my yogurt because they fucked up at the other store, and they brought all the light shit. So I had to go to the other one, and they had quail there, and I'm going. Yeah, I was thinking about it. I've never had quail, so I have no idea what it tastes like, and I was going, and it was a bit pricey. And I go, do I? Do I? I do regret not buying some. I should have bought some just to try it for once. So be adventurous, Harry. I said to myself after, but that was after the fact. So yes, basically, Harry was a loser. I lost out at having the opportunity. Cooked with ostrich eggs in Africa. So, okay, interesting. There's probably a lot of things that we haven't tried. It's just distance, cost, hard to bring those sort of things. My dad and stepmom visited Hobart recently. They like it. Nowhere else through. My dad said it was quite overly PC. Yes, yes. Oh, question. Query about teeth. Since being carnivore, I've gained teeth tissue as some edge, but it is um, jagged, not square. Ever heard of growing excess bone tissue at the bottom of the bottom of teeth? Um, yeah. It also depends on how you're using your mouth as well. So if you're crunching on bones and all that, it tends to have like your. I mean, some people are getting those little balls where they sort of crunching on them, the balls, the advertised and stuff like that. That sort of tends to the jaw, these bones and all that. It widens the face, and which is what humans were more like. Um, and it strengthens those bones, and you can crush things with greater ease and stuff like that. As I said, with starting with soft bones from chickens and stuff like that, and the end of it, if it's well cooked, and then just munching through it and all that, let alone you're getting hyaluronic acid, you're getting trace minerals, you're getting a lot of things from it. So there's benefits in some of the collagen amino acids as well. So you're not going to lose out. But at the same time, you're strengthening the compression and both the teeth, the base of the teeth as well, and the jawline and so yeah, you can get that. Is it even? Have you checked or tested? X-rayed it? I don't know. But generally speaking, it does. It's no different than if you're putting weight bearing on your bones become stronger. Your teeth, jawline, similar things. It's like use it or lose it, or if you consume very soft things. That's why I don't encourage people to consume things like, beef patties or continuously or stuff like that. You've got to have meat that has got a bit of more toughness to it, a bit more give to it, a bit more where you have to compress it a bit more with your teeth and all that. That strengthens the jawline, strengthens the teeth. It's way more healthier. I, mince meats is not the way our ancestors ate meat. Occasionally, I have mince meats. I'll make burgers and stuff like that. That's fine on occasions, and I'll put a bit of cheese on top. Then I'll turn it over and I'll put another cheese, and then I'll whack it and I'll have it like that. And I may even cook some eggs and whack an egg or a poached egg that just melts all over it. That's fine occasionally, but it's not something you should. It shouldn't be your regular thing, so to speak. Anyway, costs. Yep, more about costs. You guys having a bit of conversation about what things are costing amongst yourselves. I'm just going to flow through until I get a cue for a question. And we're down to another question from Jonathan. Anyway, I have a few vices. I'm very bad. Chewing gum, okay, vaping, Pepsi Max, caffeine free. Okay, you call those vices? Fuck's sake! If you call those vices, I call them pleasure. As my Aussie father, this guy here, um, how would you guide me to kick these to the curb? Vaping is for medical use. Obviously, it's probably not a good thing. I mean, you're eating eggs, which you're getting enough choline. That's going to help in terms of inside the actual lungs themselves. If you're vaping, I'd also do 1 gram of NAC. That would be very important to mitigate some of the vices in that regard. Chewing gum is probably less of a vice. It depends what's in the chewing gum. I mean, you can get gum that doesn't have any crap. It's a bit more pricey, I know, but you can get stuff in that regard. When it comes to Pepsi or colas, I do get a cola here, which has got a kombucha in it. A kombucha, it uses erythritol, so it doesn't, which we produce as a byproduct of carbohydrate metabolism, and most of it, like 90%, ends up in the bowl. So if you consume too much erythritol, you could get loose stools, so you've got to be very careful. So I just occasionally will have one. I wouldn't sit there drinking erythritol into high erythritol amounts of, all day long. No, I wouldn't do that. Maybe I'll have one now and then. It's usually on the weekends. So I bought 2 days ago about 4. They're on special, so I bought 4 kombuchas, usually about $3.50. They were down to $2.70 each, and I just throw them in the fridge. I haven't even had one yet. I took one today over, gave it to Dad. So that was about it. I said, because he tried it last time and he didn't mind it because it was more like a traditional. It's not sweet. It's more like the old colas used to be in the past, in the old days. Don't know whether you probably don't remember this because you weren't around at the time. You were basically just a sperm and egg, if that. So you wouldn't have actually had original cola, which is less sweet in that regard. So that's why I like it, because it is like a traditional cola. But I don't know whether something like that would be available in the UK. I've got no idea in that regard. So that could be, if you could find an equivalent, could be an option. I don't believe that, people need to, we're modern people. Yes, as long as we stick to, if you have real health problems, yes, you have to be stricter. But uh, I'm not claiming that these things are species appropriate or these are health foods. No, I'm not going to claim like Saladino does, claims that this crap and all that. But at the same time, what I put down my throat is my business, and what you put down, I don't quit. I don't. I just tell people what we know is species appropriate and what could be problematic and what problems and how they could incorporate if they're going to do some naughty things to mitigate some of the actual issues for them. But I would say if you can get a gum which has it's an erythritol base, avoid sort of spearmint things. Spearmint is not very good for for the males, where it's okay for females in terms of seems to have some interaction with our hormonal stuff. So it's probably not a good thing. Obviously, vaping has got a lot of issues with the stuff that goes in the lungs. That's why I said about NAC, 1 gram, and choline to sort of mitigate any of the complications of that. But I know taurine actually has a suppressive effect on addictions, but it's not a panacea. Just because it can lower the level of addiction, making it easier to get off in high doses. So if you were doing because you're not doing any drugs or anything like that, to be worried about, like blood pressure meds or anything like that, or lithium or whatever. But in higher doses, it has the ability to really suppress, when you're doing anywhere between 12 to 20 grams per day, it can really lower addiction. So it makes it really easier to drop an addiction, I've found, with a number of people. But you have to go over the 12 mark, which normally I stay at 6. But if I had like a tobacco addiction or some alcohol addiction or whatever, I would push the levels from between 12 and 20, and you'll see that you can tolerate and cope better with being able to say no to addictions. I've found that that's a bit of a biohack. That doesn't mean everything works perfectly, because we know even Zyban is a medication that lowers addiction to tobacco. There's a certain percentage of population that it doesn't work on. It just is what it is. So it's not a panacea. But it's worth a try if you really want to give up your vaping addiction. Could save a bit of money to buy more meat. Justify it like that to yourself, Jonathan. I'm saving money to buy more meat. Just remember that. Uh, okay, I've been making documentary style videos in the voice of David Attenborough. Uh, shall I make one on taurine? Why not? Why not? You know, as I say, getting people out there to, we're nearly 9 o'clock. I'll switch over. So oops, hit the wrong button. Oops, not cause a problem with my connection. Um, yeah, I mean, there's many subject matters uh, that can be covered. There's a lot of things that I sort of talk about. I've never made a video, but you could make a video on the sort of the electrolyte, the osmolyte regulation of all the ions, because that tends to be a very popular subject matter in the low carb community. Everybody's always, well, we need electrolytes and all that, and about how taurine, eating more meat, tends to furnish more of this, which means it also a better regulation of the ions in the body. Um, don't overhydrate. Waterlogging is not a good thing. It's the only reason why people have that addiction is due to carbohydrate diets rather than anything else. And that could be as a useful, like a little small mini documentary type thing. I'd share it on my channel and on my X channel, get it around. We need that sort of stuff, you know. So why not? Yeah, me too. Yeah, if I don't have enough protein, I feel hungry. I just need more. Uh, Probably due to my higher Neanderthal DNA as well. Most Northern Europeans have it as well. That or with the Greeks because we're about 70% tribal. We have Paleolithic genes, 70%. So you could say Aborigines of Europe, the original Aborigines of Europe population, because that's what the current genetic evidence of our ancestors' bones shows. 30% the agriculturalists and 10% Indo-European. So we are 70%. Anything over 2/3 makes you the most indigenous, and we are the oldest population of the European continent. So having those, you're going to have interacted with Neanderthals, more of the Paleo people. So we tend to have more of that stockiness. And so some Northern Europeans also have that. So they will tend to build up, much easier, bigger muscles, but also it means that your need for protein is significantly higher than even tribal people in Africa. So, yeah. And that's why it's through when I was doing the paleo period and low carb, I felt like shit. I never felt really good until I started eating more meat. The moment I started eating more meat, I felt much better and just realized I was just damn deficient in protein. That's really what I was. So, and just completely friggin' ignorant at that time. You're welcome. Now, I need to process that damn calcium one. I still haven't bloody processed it. So try and get it out this week because that's got a few interesting, nuanced things as well. Oh, I don't know if you commented already, but lately there's been a case, a supposedly carnivore dude who got cholesterol leaking in his skin. It's becoming buttery. Is it some DNA thing? Probably could be. There are certain disorders, like membrane disorders, in which what happens is certain people can't uptake or some of the pathways because we take in cholesterol into the cells because it's required because most of the cell, large parts of the cell are made of cholesterol, and to repair and heal. But some people, there are extreme people that got sort of extreme conditions where in childbirth they can't take in cholesterol, so they've got a lot in the bloodstream. They have excessive amounts, like super, super high. They just can't. They've got very poor absorption, and it's literally their cells are starving of cholesterol, and they become more senescent. They age faster as a consequence, and all that sort of stuff. So this guy may have some of those genes that maybe means that, he's eating a lot of cholesterol-rich foods and just can't absorb that sort of stuff. And he's exceeded the rate in which his enzymes can actually store it, reprocess it, and stuff like that. that's a speculation on my part. But it's not a usual normal thing at all. So, there are some biohacks, you'd have to look at the specific genetics. Some of these conditions, there is a number of pathways through the body that are all what I call riboflavin B2 riboflavin dependent. So when riboflavin is in insufficient numbers, so if this person is eating a lot of too much fat, not enough the flesh, protein, so if they're eating less of the meat part and more of the fat part, they're going to get less of the B vitamins. So they may be getting less riboflavin than they need, and they, because of their genetics, may need more. A number of the rare disorders have a riboflavin dependency. Like people with, they get fishy, the TMA, TMAO, TMA, sort of those conversions, they can't do them properly unless they upregulate these enzymes, which are, again, riboflavin dependent. I had one guy that didn't have a life, because he was, wash himself multiple times in the day. We got him on a slightly higher dose of riboflavin. The fishiness went away completely. He's got his life back. So, I would have to know the person. They would have to approach me. They would have to do a genetic test, and then they would have to send me this information for me to go through and see what genes are being affected in order to do a proper diagnosis. So, on the fly, it's impossible. Nobody can do that. But there's definitely some of these rare disorders that exist. A lot of them are riboflavin dependent. Guess what the best sources of riboflavin? Meats and dairy. Dairy is even higher. Like 16-ounce glass of milk will give you all the riboflavin you need. Guess what the MTHFR, all these cockwombles out there that are giving people B12, folate supplementation, all that for MTHFR, it's a riboflavin deficiency. Fuckwits. That's what it is. I did a video about 4 years ago that covers that. Once you give sufficient riboflavin over the actual RDI, it corrects immediately the enzyme and fixes and lowers the homocysteine because now these enzymes work properly for methylation. So, yes. A lot of rare diseases I've come across, it's just countless amounts, how many affected by have a need for the cofactor of riboflavin. I have no idea why. Don't ask me why. No friggin' idea. And probably no scientist does either. Why some of these enzymes have this cofactor requirement. And the reason why, in the first place, this thing happened, where in order to force them to operate at the normal range, requires more riboflavin than many of the other people. Why is that happening? What has happened to their ancestral, or is it? I don't even think it's an ancestral. I think why do these derangements happen that affect specifically are related to this cofactor is really weird. I don't know why, but a lot of the deep diving research has shown that riboflavin seems to be an important cofactor. And when these enzymes or these genes that produce these enzymes that transcript them, there is some sort of fault in these specific ones. Why are they vulnerable? The ones that are riboflavin dependent, I have no idea. Why those ones have a more susceptibility to mutation. Interesting, but I'm still baffled. I can't work it out. I've tried. Believe me, I can be a maniac trying to understand it, but yeah. So yes, could be. Yes, possibly. But without a proper diagnosis, there's a lot of similar conditions in that regard. I've just started scripting the touring video, heaps of new videos on the Gym Bro member section. Sounds good. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot in the physiology that we still don't fully understand. But it's interesting that certain things tend to be like in carbohydrate metabolism. When you have derangements in carbohydrate metabolism, it seems, you know, thiamine and niacin seem to help in those sort of situations. I mean, Elliot, one of the other guys, I usually don't think in the super dosing of thiamine, but that's my personal take on that. He seems to have had some success with some people, um, which are more low carbish. They have some carbs and stuff like that. But I think it's much more important in conditions which are intersected with the sort of carbohydrate metabolism type related situation. But yeah, it's interesting. But most of the rare genetic disorders tend to have these enzymes or the genes that produce these enzymes or proteins that tend to have riboflavin as an important cofactor for them to work properly. And so it's a really bizarre thing or interesting thing. I don't know what you want to call it. Why that would be the case. I still haven't been able to wrap my head around it, Jonathan. I've tried. You know what I'm like. I'll spend days going through literature, thousands of things, trying to work out how something works. But this has baffled me. I know it works, and I know that you know, it seems that when you apply this, it works. There's no animals. There's in some of them. There's not even animal studies. It's just looking just at the mechanisms of the enzymes and what cofactors they require. That's all I'm looking at, and then I'm saying, okay, let's have higher dose and let's see whether it'll work. And it works, and I go, oh, that's interesting because there's no human studies, no animal studies. It's just basically, you know, what are the cofactors that are required for that enzyme? And you play around and I've just found each time I've played around with them, riboflavin. I'm going, what the fuck is going on here? And I still can't work it out. And it annoys me. As you can see, it annoys me, but I can't work it out why. Uh, could be a Nobel Prize in it for me. Maybe that's why I'm not smart enough, possibly. I'm too much of a dummy. Anyway, I try. I'm not always successful. But yes, pretty much it. No more questions, guys. Yeah, yeah, yeah. From a young age, it's I need to know. Um, yeah, it's like a curse, if you could say. For some people, they'd probably consider it that. Yes, the studies are so badly misinterpreted in studies. You, in exercise science, they don't compare apples for apples, yet extrapolate info. I never get anything from B1 megadosing. No, you probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't. We're not on a carbohydrate-rich metabolism, you know. So I've never recommended, even people on a high carbohydrate diet, I wouldn't recommend higher B1. I'd recommend slightly more than definitely more than the RDI, but it's not a panacea in that regard. Because if you're getting enough, then as long as you don't have derangements, your metabolism and all the pathways should be working fine, because I haven't found specific, like rare diseases, which are B1 or B3 dependent. You know, these conditions may do a bit better with some of these because they're involved in the energy production, but that doesn't mean that they are actual important cofactors. Where riboflavin is one of those things that is really important. Methylation corrects it immediately. You don't need folate, you don't need B12. Obviously, you still need to eat those foods. I'm not saying that, but you don't need like heavy supplementation because the enzyme just gets automatically corrected as if you don't have the genes, so you don't have to bother. You just eat more riboflavin-rich foods and you're done. It sorts the problem out, so to speak. But yeah, it's one of those baffling mysteries to say the least. But yeah, I know what you mean with studies. God, I go through and I realise junk, 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 junk. It's one after another junk. You know, you get a few things here which show a bit of mechanism, and sometimes they can be useful to sort of explain something, and then I have to sort of extrapolate a bit and all that because there's not enough information, which is annoying. But a lot of the stuff is, yeah, it's a lot of question marks on it, and it does. Yeah, it's annoying that so much money goes into this research that happens every year, and it's tax dollars that are going into it. But unfortunately, a lot of it is very poor, very poorly constructed, done. They're not even asking the right questions. They're not even comparing things properly or measuring things properly or trying to control things as best as possible. In many cases, there's a lot of pilot studies, which are just bullshit studies. They don't really tell you anything. The noise in the actual statistical data is so high, it's next to useless, because just not enough power in these studies. It's just, yeah. And in the end of the day, for us as in the carnivore community, we just have to look at things. What's the N15 data? The bones, the collagen of our paleo ancestors? What is it? Super hypercarnivore. You know, our the morphology of our digestive tract is quite clearly carnivorous. It's not herbivorous. We don't even have a cecum. We've got a little appendix. So it's quite clear what we're designed to consume and get the best nutrition from. So, and all this other stuff, people say, "Oh, you can eat this," and people. No, all this stuff is all hybridized, all manufactured. It's all domesticated. In nature, the stuff that's in nature is very fibrous, has very hardly anything. It cannot sustain humans. There's just not enough in nature of these little things. We've taken them and actually made them different. We've domesticated them. We've made them more sugary, bigger, to be produced now, in particular now, all year round. So, no, that's not the natural food. So we know that. I don't need science to do a study to prove the carnivore diet. There's thousands of years of proof in the bones of our ancestors. That's good enough for me in that regard. But the nuancing stuff, that's a different thing altogether. There's a lot of nuancing questions which we haven't answered. And then there's modern adaptations in the last 10,000 years, like the dairy genes and many related genes with other things that have obviously changed some people's requirements in terms of certain micronutrients and even if probably potentially even some macronutrients and other compounds in some of these foods that there's still thousands of compounds in a lot of animal foods we still haven't investigated. We're wasting a whole lot of garbage studies on nonsense epidemiology when we're not even looking at what are the things in these foods and what do they do, what is their pharmacokinetics, if any, in the body. How do they work? How do they affect physiology? None of that's been done with a lot of things. We're still in the dark in the Stone Age. And I'm disappointed that a lot of money is misused to push narratives and bullshit. It's annoying. You go through, you can spend like a day, 2 or 3 days, and you realise you don't find anything on a subject matter. And you go, I just wasted 3 days on a whole lot of bullshit studies. Yeah. And unlike people like Thomas DeLauer and people like that, who also just put up bullshit studies because that's all they do, they're at least they've even for their bullshit studies that they put up, they've got a whole lot of staff members that can do all that work for them. So I got a day job, so it's pretty hard. I can only spend the evenings doing that. So it's annoying that we don't have enough stuff to have better insights in that regard. So, yes. Danny, how are you, mate? Anyway, it is 9, bit after 9. I'm going to pull the pin. We've been going now on for well over 3 hours. So I try to keep them, around 3 hours. Actually, the morning one was actually shorter. Since nobody was asking questions, I stopped it quite fast. And I went over to Dad's place and gave me an opportunity to go earlier to Dad, sit, have a chat with him about a number of things. So we had a few interesting conversations. So anyway, yeah, and also just socialising with him a bit. Since my sister's left Tasmania, it's sort of it's only me and his local friends. So his brother left the state recently as well, so he's gone interstate to live close to his daughter in Melbourne. So yeah, and potentially my other auntie may also potentially go. So let's say people are thinning out at his age bracket at 90. A lot of people have died that he knew. So, when you live longer, that's the other thing that happens. A lot of people that you did know, your network starts shrinking as well. So, yeah. Yeah, not a problem, Andy. You're welcome. And, DC, you're welcome as well. Uh, I hope you've checked some of my stuff in my cancer playlist. If you haven't, there's a lot of information there I believe you'll find useful. Just on another note, I would avoid, you've probably heard about people are popularising it now, talking about it, this new senolytic, which is the FOXO 4 DRI peptide. Give it a miss. The tumor suppressor, the main one, which is what I call the guardian, what they sort of call the guardian of the genome, P54, that gets slightly deranged, and so does basically what's the other one? The the FOXO4. Yeah, I believe so, and they play a role because FOXO4 has an effect on pathway which affects the FOXO3. And these, when they're slightly deranged, what it actually prevents a cell going senescent. Now, a lot of people, we talk about, damaged cells, best to clear them out with a strong immune system or with senolytics. But at the same time, I would rather a cell go senescent than go rogue. So if you're preventing it, because what P54 does, it binds to the DNA and goes, hold on, are you okay? And the DNA goes, I'm okay, relatively. So what it does is it says, well, this is viable. So it upregulates certain pathways to repair and revert, bring it back from senescent into a cell that is in a better state, which can cell divide, continue cell division. If it's not, then it pushes into a senescent state and it initiates processes of apoptosis, which also involve the immune system because there's signaling. That CD38 is sending a signal saying, kill me, kill me, kill me, the cytokine that it's actually sending. Well, that's how the immune system gets the information. So if you've got a suppressed immune system, no, you can't kill these things, can you? And if you then suppress with, taking high dose of NAD, like these fucking crackpots talk about, then you weaken the signaling of CD38. What do you think is going to happen to those senescent cells? They're going to go rogue, cancer. So you've got to be very careful how you play around with this sort of stuff. So I would give that a miss. Where with Pfizer, not a problem. Take it at night at 9 o'clock with some cream, which is because it's fat soluble as a senolytic, as a polyphenol, but it amplifies it under melatonin conditions to well over 600. I think was it 680%? I think, Jonathan, I can't remember. It's a while since I did the video, a number of years. So yeah, that's a far better one to use, but you can't use it every day because it interferes with mTOR. Nothing's for free and nothing's, without its side effects. So we use it for about like 3 days and then the rest of the week, no. So only for people who have a lot of senescence, like a lot of damaged cells or cancer. But everyone else, possibly just, once every year for, a couple of days every week for 1 or 2 months. It's probably all they need just to clear out some excessive. As long as you take it at night, you're going to get the best results, more bang for your bucks. You can get sleepy. That's another reason why doing it at night. You can get a bit sleepy from the effect, but it depends on the person. So I know that Paul down here had a bit of a sleepy effect, but he's sort of much better on that front. So yes, knock out some of those old bastards and feel a bit and look a bit younger, so to speak. Anyway, yep. You're welcome. Thanks for the information. Cheers, Harry. Yep. Not a problem. Thank you. Appreciate it. You're welcome. Yes. Anyway, guys, appreciate it. Take care. I'm out of here. So if I keep on talking, I'll never leave. You know me. There's Paul hiding in the background. You local bastard. How are you, old fella? Yes, I mentioned you. I gave you a plug about your Pfizer addiction and your sleepy adventures. It's what happens to 70-plus-year-olds, apparently. Anyway, see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. See you, Scotty. See you, mate. What you mean? Once the stream is over, you will keep talking. Yeah, probably. Anyway. See ya. I better go. I'm out of here. See yous.